you're going to want some tools. One of them is a rotary cutter. You'll need some form of an acrylic ruler and a cutting mat. Put these three things together and you'll be able to cut strips of fabric straight. Just hang on in there and I'll show you how. The world of rotary cutting. These days we cut our fabric with a rotary cutter, although many of you might have a die cutting machine which has various dies in it that will equally cut fabric. But for cutting strips and indeed squares, these rulers are very useful, and they come in a variety of makes and different sizes. These are all rotary cutting rulers, and they are a good thick acrylic plastic, 6 millimeters thick usually, which allows you to cut down the edge of it with the rotary cutter, and we'll come to that in a moment. And there's one by Easy Rule. They also come in not only the 12-inch size, but you can get 18 inches, you can get the 24-inch ones, the really long ones like that. And if I'm starting patchwork, then I would suggest that you buy the 24-inch one. Why do you want the 24-inch one? Well, it will fit the middle size cutting mat, and also it fits a folded width of fabric. Most fabric's 44 inches when folded. When you fold it in half, it's 22 inches, so this ruler will fit it, although I fold my fabric in 4, as you will see. Now, when it comes to rotary cutters, here again you have a wealth of different cutters. There are 3 here in the different sizes. Now, these are just the regular stick cutters. You've got the 28mm one, the usually most popular one, 45, and the 60. The 60 is great for chopping through a whole load of fabrics. You can get up to 12, 16 layers. The 45 will easily do 8 layers of fabrics, but this one is particularly good for going round small corners. So if you want to do curves and things, you want one of those. But if you're setting out to buy one, just go for the 45 in the middle. Makes. Many companies make different rotary cutters. Here are 3 from Fiskars. This one from Fiskars opens and shuts by pushing that button there. That exposes the blade and you close it. The stick one I showed you earlier, it's very simple. It's just a backwards and forwards, and this has become like breathing. This one here from Fiskars opens and shuts by releasing that tab on the top here, and that opens it, and then you can close it. When you're going home, you can lock it so it doesn't always come open. There's another one here from Fiskars, which is ergonomic, so it takes some of the stress off your arm, and that can be opened to form a longer cutter should you so desire. Now, these cutters are in the main all lefty-righty, so you can have that in your right hand, you can have it in your left hand. There is one here which is a perfectly good rotary cutter, and indeed has the added advantage in that it stands up, but this is right-handed and right-handed only. My favourite rotary cutter of choice, if I'm not using my basic stick one, is this one. And the reason for using this one is that when I squeeze the handle, the blade is exposed. When I release the handle, it's covered. And at all times, that blade has to be covered. The second you stop cutting, you cover it. None of this, oh, I'm just going to cut for another second or two. This one has a lock on it, so when you depress the lock, that handle won't go back. And you do that for when you're travelling. So you can put it in your bag, and you can't inadvertently slide the handle back and catch your hand on that, because if you catch your hand on the blade, you will bleed. It really makes a deep cut. You never ever, though, open it out and actually lock it in place with it like that, because that means if you fall on the floor, you've had it. So we have rotary cutters. There's one more rotary cutter that I haven't mentioned, which has become quite popular over time, and this is something called the True Cut one. It comes with its own ruler, and down the edge of the ruler there is a little groove, and the rotary cutter, notice it says Jennie's, and by the way, it's a really good watch point, is mark your rotary cutters, because if you're in a class situation, it's so easy to pick up somebody else's. This sits on the edge of the ruler and doesn't slide off, so that's another option. Right, having dealt with the rotary cutters, how are we going to cut our fabric? Before we start rotary cutting the fabric, a quick word about mats. They come in a variety of sizes. This is probably one of the smallest ones, great for taking to class. It's 11 by 18. This one is equally good for taking to class. It folds up. You could have the A3 size I have in front of me. You can go much larger. But be a little bit careful with all these cutting mats, because they are fragile when it comes to heat. Do not leave them in the back of the car, because if you leave them in the back of the car on an uneven surface on a hot day, it warps and you can't get the warping out. I've tried everything. Not a bad idea to find a mat that's got an inner core, because that does help to keep it a little bit flatter. So when you're storing your mat, make sure it's somewhere nice and flat and not bent. Don't put the iron on it, don't put your cup of coffee on it. Rotary cutters, you want to make certain you have a good sharp blade in it. If you find that your mat is getting lots of little whiskers of fabric in it, it's probably because your blade is blunt on your rotary cutter. A good way to get any fibres out of the mat is to put a small amount of washing up liquid on the mat and one of those kitchen pan scrubbers, the green ones, and just go roundy. That will often take the fibres out. When you are using your rotary cutter, as I said, make sure it's a nice sharp blade. Try not to always cut on the same line on your cutting mat. And just as an aside, when you're using the rotary cutter and your blade does need changing, before you take the rotary cutter apart, take a photograph of it. And don't forget to put your name on it, because then at least you'll know where the bits went. So we've got a nice sharp cutter, we've got the mat, I've got the ruler. All I need to do now is cut the fabric. Iron your fabric before you begin. And I tend to fold my fabric in half, aligning the selvages. The selvages are the stiff, the rigid, the closely woven, sometimes you've got the printing on, maybe have fluffy bits. They are the edges of the material. Now, you could leave the material like that, and you can see mine's got a remarkably wobbly edge. I think the grandchildren have been cutting it. The big 24-inch ruler will fit nicely on top of it. Rather than try to cut this way, which is not a good idea, one could then turn the cutting mat round and cut up that side. I must confess that I prefer to take my fabric, fold it in half once, and then bring the selvages to touch the centre crease. That just means I've got less fabric I have to wobble my way along. Turn the fabric round and align the ruler with the sides of the fabric. That line lines up there, that line lines up there. Bring the ruler as near to the edge of the material as you can get it. You want to save fabric. Guard off your cutter. Cut and push firmly. Stand upright, push away from you. There's never any pulling towards you. Keep on cutting right up to the edge there. Nice, neat, firm edge, ready for cutting whatever size strip off. I'm going to now flip the fabric over, bring the ruler in from the left-hand side and measure the desired amount. So I could have a 2-inch strip, a 3-inch strip, 3.5-inch strip, a 3 7/8-inch strip. Should I want more than the width of my ruler, then I can lay it on the cutting mat and cut, say, an 8-inch strip by using the markings on the cutting mat. But at all times, the ruler is protecting the fabric. There is a way or a vogue for people leaving the fabric as it is, trimming the edge off, then using the mat to cut with. Now, if you were to do that and you wanted an accurate 1-inch strip and you're feeling a bit nervous, as you go up there, oh my goodness me, you could cut and miscut, which means you just ruined that strip of fabric. If you do it the way that I suggest, which is put the fabric on the right-hand side, bring the ruler in from the left, and you can remember this, right-handed people, fabric's got a R in it, R for right, ruler's got a L in it, L for left. Then I can cut up the edge here, and should I have deviated, like gone off like that, I could have retrimmed to the edge of the ruler. I think that's a better way to do it. So right-handed people, fabric on the right, ruler on the left. If you are left-handed, then you would put the ruler on the top. Take your rotary cutter now. This one is for right-handed people. To make it a left-handed one, I will put the blade on the other side. The stick one here is automatically righty-lefty. So you place the ruler on top there, guard off your cutter, and you cut up the edge of the fabric. Sadly, I don't have enough strength to do that with my left hand. Having trimmed the end off, and let's pretend that's a neatly trimmed end, you would then put the fabric so that the trimmed end is here on the left. The ruler then comes in from the right. All you've got to remember is ruler begins with an R. Turn the ruler around so you get the correct measurement. There is, say, 2 inches, and then you can take your cutter and cut up the edge there. At all times, you open the blade to start cutting, and the second you finish cutting, you close the blade. So there you are. That is a quick guide to how you rotary cut strips.